Thanks for joining us today, everyone, for the Kapish webinar with our theme today of unlocking IT efficiency with SAP, LeanIX and IBM Apptio. It's great to see so many of our customers on this call, and we're really looking forward to sharing with you today the value of aligning your business, IT and finances by integrating LeanIX and Apptio. Bit of housekeeping first. We will be recording this session, so feel free to share with others in your organisation afterwards that they weren't able to attend today. And we've also enabled the Q&A feature at the top of the webinar. So please make sure that you pop any of the questions that you may have into the Q&A as we go along, and we'll either endeavour to answer them throughout the presentation, or otherwise we will have a scheduled Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. Okay, thanks, Craig. So I'd like to introduce you to the Kapish Enterprise Architecture team on the call today. My name is Rachel Smith. I'm an account executive for Kapish based in our Brisbane office, and I'm joined here with a few of my colleagues that you'll no doubt have seen around before. So we've got Oliver Kerr, Rory Burke, Jack Durea and Craig Stanley on the call with us today. You'll also see we've got a couple of great presenters for you today. So we've got Daniel Nicholson, who's the head of architecture at the Coles Group, and Edbert Chung, who's a solution consultant at IBM Apptio. So a bit of a jam-packed agenda for the next hour, and we're really looking forward to bringing you an insightful Lunch and Learn webinar. We've got a bit of a brief agenda here, and we'll have a look at a bit about Kapish, a bit of an introduction about who we are and what we do. Then we'll hand over to Ed for an IBM Apptio presentation on how EA and IT work together to enable better decision making. And then we'll hear from our Kapish customer, Dan Nicholson, Head of Architecture at Coles, with his presentation on 7 steps to enterprise architecture. And this will be followed then with a discussion between Daniel and Craig Stanley from Kapish on how Coles is leveraging LeanIX and Apptio to enhance their IT strategy and to drive their business growth. We'll have the Q&A session towards the end, so please remember to use the Q&A feature at the top here and make sure that we can answer your questions as we go through. And then we'll have a bit of a wrap up. We'll give you some details on how you can contact us if you've got any follow-up questions, or if you'd like to receive a tailored demonstration afterwards. Okay. So a bit about Kapish. Who are we? So for over 15 years, Kapish has delivered innovative solutions to our customers. Our enterprise architecture and business transformation team has a wealth of experience in assisting organisations on their digital transformations. Kapish Enterprise Architecture has over 70 customers across the APAC region, and these are across many different industries, including government, finance, retail and education. So our Kapish ecosystem, or our Centre of Excellence, is tailored for each of the customer engagements that we do. And I make sure that we're identifying those particular use cases for each customer. So the foundation of our ecosystem is underpinned by the best of breed transformation tools that we partner with. And you can see these logos here. These include Applus, Apptio and SAP, LeanIX and Signavio. And these tools provide our customers those integrated solutions that connect all their information and enable them to deliver those data insights. So the Kapish team is here to act as your trusted advisor, and we deliver practical and immediate value to our customers. This starts with our jumpstart onboarding at the beginning of our engagement, and then is followed up by our team, which is consisting of dedicated roles across pre-sales, delivery and customer success. Our premium support team work closely with our customers to develop their strategic roadmap and align outcomes that are documented to best practice that will help uplift their EA maturity. We also have a large catalogue of IP add-ons that can be deployed to enhance our customers' LeanIX workspaces and expand on the use cases that can be achieved as part of that. So we work with our customers to identify these use cases. You'll see some of those across the top here. So it may be wanting to understand what their technology spend and value is to the organisation. And this is where we would see the Apptio LeanIX integration come into play, or they may be looking to transform their business processes and they require a single source of truth to collaborate with those stakeholders. So the Kapish ecosystem has the technique, the tools and the team, and we're really here to make sure that you're getting value out of the tools and also out of the services that we provide. So I'm hoping today we'll be able to demonstrate to you how we work with our customers and our partners to be able to achieve those outcomes for you. That's it from me. I'm going to hand over now and introduce Edbert Chung from IBM Apptio for his presentation on how EA and IT finance management work together to enable better decision making. Ed is a solutions consultant in Asia Pacific for Apptio. He has over 5 years of experience primarily focusing on IT finance. And today he's going to introduce us to Apptio and the value of EA and IT working together through the integration of LeanIX and Apptio. So over to you, Ed. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. And thanks, Kapish, for having me to come along to speak with you all today. It's lovely to be here. And what I'm hoping to do is sort of give you a look into maybe the dark side. So I'm not an enterprise architect. I come from the IT finance lens. But what we really wanted to talk to you about today was how those two functions in an organization can really work together to help enable better decision making around IT. Thanks, Craig. So I thought I'd start by just giving you a little background into who Apptio is, and for those of you who aren't aware, what we look to do in this space. So Apptio is really about understanding IT investment to help drive better value and conversations for any organization. And I'm very careful in using the word value because a lot of the times when we talk about this space, we're focused on IT financial management, costings, analysis, and even what we call technology business management. But the overall goal of Apptio and the TBM framework is to really explain to an organization just how valuable the technology investments that they make are. We have worked very closely with Kapish in the past, and we have a dedicated SAP LeanIX integration. But what we are seeing is that more and more organizations are turning to tech, and as a result, Apptio is able to manage around $650 billion worth of technical spend through the Apptio platform. Next slide, please, Craig. And what I thought I'd do with some of this information is to just distill down what we are seeing in the market from an Apptio standpoint based on that $650 billion worth of IT spend. So we know that the global trend is that building new applications for an organization fuels a lot of innovation. That's internal innovation in a company. So you'll see that a lot of platforms or a lot of teams are moving to cloud native apps. They're adopting cloud native technologies like Kubernetes. And what's happening is that they're more and more likely to turn to multi-cloud as we start to bring in more complex data analytical tools, AI, all of those new things that help fuel innovation in the IT space. Now, the end result of that is that digital services make up 87% of any industry. And whether a company wants to be a digital company or not, they sort of have to be nowadays. So where Apptio can really help these organizations is to ask these key questions. And the biggest key question and the biggest burning question that we see at Apptio is, do we as a business have transparency into the value of our IT? If we drill that down one more level, we start to ask questions like, how do we shift from cost of IT to understanding the value of IT? How do we more accurately plan, budget, and forecast our tech spend so that we end on target every year? And how do we reduce costs? So these sort of questions are the ones that more organizations are asking, and hopefully Apptio can help answer some of these questions. Next slide, Craig, please. So what is blocking people from getting the answer to these questions? It really is a couple of these key categories that have to do a lot with the data that we have access to and the overall strategy of a company. So at the moment, a lot of organizations have a very siloed view of IT. The app footprint might not be understood very well. There's a lot of disparate and uncorrelated data. And overall, organizations have a lot of competing priorities. So this is the view from the IT finance lens. But what you'll realize very quickly is that these challenges are probably the same challenges that an EA persona might be dealing with. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Craig. What's important to realize is that the reason why these blockers are the same is because the IT finance persona and the enterprise architect persona are two different people in organizations, both working towards the same sort of solution for an organization, just from different sides. Whereas the IT finance persona is really interested in answering what is the total cost to deliver IT and how much it might and how much we might be able to remove in terms of costs. The architect is answering that same question and then also figuring out, do these applications have technical fit? Are they sustainable? Are they future forward for the company? If we can start to bring some of these data sets together, we get a much more detailed and a much more clearer picture of what our IT estate looks like. That helps with a lot of transparency, and it helps with the defensibility of making our decisions. If we know that the data that sits behind those decisions have been vetoed and queried by two different personas, they make it a lot more defensible. And if we can bring them in a system that is updating constantly, that also allows that information to be dependable as well, because we understand that it is always fresh. So what we really are trying to do with the Apptio and LeanIX connection is to answer these three big D questions that we have from the different personas. Over to the next slide, please, Craig. So I thought I'd just end by talking about two very high-level use cases where the connection really makes a lot of sense. So one of the first things that we would like to do with any customer that we work with is understand what the overall tech spend looks like, where we're mapping out the GL or the costing data from something like SAP and understanding it from an IT finance framework. What this allows us to do is also get an understanding of the addressable versus non-addressable spend. This is how much we can actually take out by understanding what is committed, what isn't committed, what can be depreciated, what can't be depreciated. And this is where I talk about the connector from Apptio sending data into a LeanIX integration. Because if that data is able to be fed into the LeanIX system, the enterprise architects have much more clarity and much more confidence behind the spend data that has been built up in a very robust financial model when they look at the cost of a particular application or a cost of a particular service. Over to the next slide, please, Craig. Now, the opposite use case is where we can start to pull LeanIX data out of LeanIX and into Apptio. And this is useful really at that solution or that application layer. So in Apptio, we have an understanding of how much it costs to deliver a particular application or a particular solution. And we have an understanding of how much that is being consumed by the different business units in an organization. So at any point in time, we can make an analysis that says the finance team has consumed $40 worth of IT per person in the month of April. Where we can really start to bring in more information from LeanIX is by looking at some of those fact sheets and using LeanIX as a really good source of truth to bring in information that will help strengthen the argument behind keeping certain applications and rationalizing and removing other applications. So cost is obviously not the only factor. If we can bring in compliance-related data, business criticality, technical fit, compliance, that sort of information allows us to make a much more informed decision around app rationalization as well. So hopefully that has given you a good look into how data can flow either from Apptio into LeanIX and LeanIX back into Apptio to tell a more compelling story around some use cases like app rationalization. Now, I've just ended here with a slide of the different APAC customers that Apptio has and works very closely with. And if some of these organizations you work for, but you're not aware of Apptio, there's probably an IT finance person sitting in your organization who could benefit from opening up a discussion around how a LeanIX and an Apptio connection could help with their data sources. So if anything from this presentation has resonated with you, if you have any follow-up questions, if you want to connect about maybe using some of the Apptio LeanIX connections, please feel free to reach out to myself or ask any of these questions in the Q&A. With that, I think I'll hand back to Rachel and Craig.
That's great. Thank you, Ed. That's fantastic, and I love the detailed, defensible, and dependable is such a important thing with any data that we're capturing across the enterprise architecture suite. So, thank you very much for taking the time to join us on this call and talking through that those use cases. I'd now like to introduce Daniel Nicholson from Coles, Head of Enterprise Architecture there. And Daniel's been with us with Coles for quite some time, and with Kapish working as a customer since about 2021. They're a great example of a customer who's been on a very interesting EA maturing journey over time, and they've stepped through the classic use cases for EA maturity and are moving into the connected ecosystem, which is where we see significant value and uplift being attained. So Daniel, I'd like to hand to you to walk through your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Daniel Nicholson from Head of Architecture for Coles. I've been in this role now for about 2.5 years, and with Coles for about 4.5 in total. If we go to the next slide, I always kind of like to show a bit of the scale. Oh, sorry, I'll quickly go through the title of this this presentation, which is effectively from premonition to prophecy. So kind of how we went from thinking about a problem or knowing that there was a problem to how we implemented LeanIX and kind of what we're using it for now. So yeah, next slide. That's just me again. And on to Coles. So everyone's familiar with Coles. I'm not going to tell you that we're a supermarket. Maybe some things that people aren't so familiar with is probably the size or the scale of Coles. So we have 120,000 employees, kind of give or take. There's 1,600 people in technology. Architecture itself is a team size of 75. So that's grown significantly over the last 3 or 4 years, and I'll cover that off a bit in one of the other slides. We have a huge amount of locations. So if you think of Coles and our liquor brands, it's about 1,800 locations. There's about 40,000 devices that we manage. We have 2 data centers and one primary hyperscaler as Azure, and we really think of our company in about 8 different domains. So we kind of range from obviously the supermarkets to liquor, to supply chain, to our corporate systems, fintech, digital marketing, e-commerce, etc. So there's a lot of scope and scale. So when I first started at Coles, one of the things that I noticed was obviously the size and scale of the place is massive. And luckily for me, I started 2 months before COVID, so just in 2020. So we had it was enough time to kind of meet everyone and see everyone in person, and then kind of go and work from home for about 1.5 years. One of the things I started to notice kind of in my EA role was it was really hard to find any kind of like centralized information. So every domain, every team, every working group had a different list. They had a different way of storing their information, a different way of categorizing it. There weren't any particular standards. There was like most people, we have a ServiceNow CMDB. We'd done, I think, a very Coles thing and tried to customize it to fit us, as opposed to trying to fit our data in the CMD, which made it quite hard to reference things. And we didn't have any kind of like centralized problems. So all these things started stacking up, and there was kind of that need to do something. So we had to do something. We couldn't just leave it as it was. So we kind of foresaw a problem, and then we thought about how we're going to act on it. So next slide, thanks. So this is kind of the madness step. We're going under massive team growth. We kind of grew about 40 people in about 6 months. So the architecture team size almost tripled over a very short period of time. There were a lot of big projects landing. We'd all gone to remote working. So knowledge transfer was really, really difficult during COVID. You couldn't sit next to someone. You couldn't actually see over their screen or look over their shoulder. And like every organization, we use a million different acronyms for every different application platform or thing we measure. So collaboration was hard. It was hard to share. It was hard to find information, especially not being able to sit next to someone or look at someone. It was difficult to kind of like share that info. And once again, spreadsheets just kept getting passed around. And it was just I guess a challenging time for everyone, but it was very challenging with that team growth, the remote work, and the collaboration challenges, especially the huge projects we were trying to land. So on to the next slide. And I apologize for all the transitions in here. I was meant to take them out. Step 3 was arguing. And I like to think of this one as when you get a group of architects in a room, they're called an argument of architects. It's always hard to land on particular definitions, especially definitions of things like applications, in definitions of standards and templates and things like that. So one of the things we had as these kind of requests came in, so this kind of like, I think of this like situation, complication, resolution. So every request that kind of came into enterprise architecture was usually unplanned. So the workload wasn't being managed well, and it would come in, and we'd end up having to go through all the different teams. We'd go through the tech teams and the database teams and the server teams to try and get their application lists, their reports, their outputs from like CMDBs, things like that. And this was to answer things like compliance questions and lifecycle management questions and investment questions. So kind of grouping all this information each time was complicated because every request would be slightly different. We had no standard definitions, as I said, or common vernacular to kind of answer these requests. And by the time you, of course, assemble all the spreadsheets, you collate them, you kind of merge them all together, you kind of work out your stats and metrics, you ask all the teams to fill in all the data, you pull out your report, and then it eventually goes up to the tech LT or the ELT or the board. The next time that a request comes in, it's a slightly different one. The data is now out of date, and the scramble kind of begins again. So we decided to do some things, which was like standardize on some of our terminologies, some of our meanings and definitions, but then of course look for some other solutions to our problems. So in this case, it was looking at creating a business capability model. So we had that really common vernacular, but then also centralizing all of our applications, all our data, all our metadata into an enterprise architecture management suite. So we went on an RFP journey, and long story short, we kind of decided on LeanIX. So next slide. Now, this was a bit of a play on words. We called it Eat at Coles. Obviously, we sell food, people eat it, but it's also the enterprise architecture tool. So it was we went through a number of different names, and I think that was the one that was voted the most popular name. But everyone either calls it Eat or LeanIX. So. Now, the consolidation process. This was this is what I like to refer to almost as that kind of like that spreadsheet assassination process. So I would start going to the teams. I would get the enterprise architects to go to different teams. We're trying to find every spreadsheet that we could. So we'd go and find spreadsheets from the database team, for the server teams, all the domain leads, the heads of, the product owners, and effectively we'd find them, we'd combine them, we'd load them into LeanIX, the real consolidation process, and then we'd pretty much tell people, please stop using that spreadsheet. Here's a login to LeanIX. So one of the kind of the key things that we wanted out of an EAMS tool was we wanted access for everyone. So we didn't want it to be locked down. We didn't want it to be just an enterprise architecture thing, because if we didn't want the enterprise architects to be like a bottleneck or the architecture team to be a bottleneck. We wanted everyone to be able to use it. And the licensing construct around LeanIX was very good for us. It's very good for large organizations. So effectively we just gave access to everyone in technology. So those kind of 1,600 people kind of had access pretty much once we'd done the initial data load to be able to go in and view all their own data. So as I said, once we found these spreadsheets, as we found these different registers across our different platforms like Confluence and SharePoint, we'd effectively remove them. We'd tell people, please don't use that spreadsheet anymore. Here's your application. This is what it looks like in LeanIX, and this is what it looks like mapped against our kind of like business capabilities. So now we can actually see what capabilities each application supports, or how, even how we have duplications in certain capabilities. So this process was really important, especially making sure that people would start updating data in a centralized system as opposed to going back to their spreadsheets, their confluences, things like that. So that democratization of the data and the ease of use of the system were really important. The next kind of step was really, providing champions in teams. So we were very open about being able to provide training and access. So if anyone didn't know, didn't understand, or wanted to create a report, we would facilitate that. So we would use our team of IBLs and grads, and I'm fortunate enough to have at least a couple of IBLs, interns, and grads at any one time. So usually about a team of 3 or 4. So we would effectively sit them down with one of those grads or IBLs and get them to understand the problem and then show them how to use the tool. So then creating champions out in the different tech teams was great, because then they would promote the tool within their own team. So we'd find a particular person who was interested in consolidating data, or who used to manage the spreadsheets, and we'd create them, and they would be the champion, and they would then start promote the benefits to their team. Thank you. So this is where we kind of it really started to kind of kick up a gear. So now we have a tool. We have a tool and it's got lots of data in it. How do we actually start using it? So one of the things that I ended up doing for my team of enterprise architects was effectively, cascading performance metrics into the architecture team's goals to make sure that data was updated, it was correct. We had different levels of business owners or tech owners. We had all kind of the key metrics or metadata against the applications were kind of built into the performance goals to have a minimum level of completion. So then the data gets better, the system gets more used, the data gets better, the system gets more used. So it kind of builds on itself, because people then trust it because the data is good and it's referenceable. So then they start using it more and we get more data in there. So this is one of the really key steps, I guess, of building up momentum in the system. Sorry, I'll just finish off on that one quickly. The other part is, once again, those kind of the old spreadsheets. Anytime we could find one, or anytime we had almost like a use case for it, we would try and say, how can we actually facilitate this out of LeanIX as opposed to putting it anywhere else? So showing other teams the data that was in there, then they would say, okay, well, we're looking at tracking this, or we've got a compliance question around this. What can we do? Where can we put it? And we'd always try and answer LeanIX first, and we wouldn't just kind of take that approach of putting every single thing in there. So if it worked for most of the applications, then we would do it. If it was only for a couple of things, we might still have a separate register. But in most cases, we'd try and make it work in the most broad sense possible, so it would help the most amount of people. And that really started allowing other teams to start serving their self-serving, or looking at their own data, generating their own reports, getting other value out of the system itself. Thank you. Next slide. So this is where we kind of talk about step 6, which is proliferation. So we've got solid, consistent data in there. It keeps getting updated. It keeps getting better. A number of technical teams are starting to use it. And then we're seeing use cases across other teams. So once we start talking about putting things in our publicly identifiable information, so which applications are internet facing, which applications have PII data, or as we also process PCI data, so payment card industries data, as we have those different kind of tags, we kind of created a new metadata block in LeanIX, and then all of a sudden, so security could start using it to do assessments on which systems are internet facing, so which needs to be penetration tested, which systems have PII data, so which ones we need to do kind of different access controls on. Then we start getting risk using it, and risk was a really great use case. They came to us and said, hey, we've heard about this amazing tool. Do you know who has it? And I was like, excellent, I have it. What can I do to help you? And they were real almost power users of the application, the platform itself, because once we started cutting in data like internet facing workloads or PII or PCI, then they could actually start creating almost Venn diagrams of the most critical applications we have and where the highest risks are. So we would then start using data in LeanIX to actually drive kind of categorizing risks in other systems like Archer for risk management, or we'd start using it in alignment with strategy to take it up to board papers. And this is where we kind of looked at that lifecycle management side of this as well. So now we've got systems that are critical, that are internet facing, that have PII or PCI data in there, and some of them are aging systems. So what are our most critical targets for lifecycle management? What should we start looking at first to start to remediate? What we should look to for patching or vulnerability testing, things like that. Another use of strategy that we kind of got out of this was, once again, that kind of simplification lens. So with our business capability model that we'd done in conjunction with the kind of the RFP, we'd mapped out the entire Coles organization across all the business units into different capabilities. I think we went down to we started at level 1 or 2, and we evolved it over time, over a number of different years, to kind of a level 3. And that then allows us to, from that strategic lens, to look at how many applications are supporting a particular business capability. And I like to think of our point of sale or a point of service. We effectively have 3 different applications that support that one function. So is that now a prime target for simplification? Can we drop off a system now that we've got, now that we know there are 3 supporting that one capability? We also kind of looked at other things along the way. The SOCI challenge for us, so security of critical infrastructure, that was a bit of a, we were almost blindsided by that. SOCI is usually applicable to things like power companies, water, gas, electricity, I think even internet and banks. But post kind of COVID, Coles and Woolworths were deemed as critical infrastructure for food security. So for us, luckily, and this is kind of where that premonition kind of step comes back in, that the additional regulatory challenges that we were seeing more frequently, that kind of did end up in SOCI becoming very real for us very quick. So to answer that SOCI challenge, luckily we had a system that had all our applications, we had all our business criticalities, we had all our key capabilities mapped against that, and actually answering that kind of compliance request became a lot simpler through the use of LeanIX. So, and we still use it right now for our kind of our reporting. We've just gone through our FY24 attestation, and that's all driven out of the reports that are done in LeanIX. Okay, next slide. So, as I said, we've kind of got to that kind of prophecy step. So now we've got security, risk, audit, compliance using it. The data's good. As I said, I used metrics or KPIs in my team's performance cycle to make sure that the data continue to get better. We've got lots of teams using it. So what can we actually drive out of LeanIX? So yeah, as I said, that simplification option, that's been really good to highlight where we have duplication, or also in the converse of that, where we are under prepared for certain types of capabilities. And this is being used by strategy for things like our kind of Coles 360 media division. So it's a newer function that we started up, and we saw that we didn't actually have systems or capabilities to fulfill some of those things. So we have capabilities listed there, but no application to support it. And that was usually meaning like a spreadsheet or a manual process, something like that, was actually supporting that capability. So as we grew certain areas, we could actually also see gaps. So that there's a simplification on one side, and then there's the kind of gaps in where we need to invest on the other side. The LCM, lifecycle management investment, is also kind of key. Once again, we can use that kind of like those different lenses of criticality. Now we have like that SOCI compliance as well. Different metrics or different lenses. I like to also kind of think of it as a Venn diagram of overlapping things. So when we look at our lifecycle management, what is the most critical systems that are the most end of life out of support, and where do we kind of put those fundings? And as I said, compliance reporting, this is just going to continue to grow out of it, and this will continue to like help us with other requests, like things when we get challenges from, say, the ACCC, or other regulatory compliance reporting or challenges, we'll be able to kind of facilitate that data easily and more consistently, or the actual risk and compliance team will be able to facilitate that data themselves out of LeanIX. Moving on to the next slide. So kind of, a recap on the kind of 7 steps to getting an enterprise architecture management suite. So kind of going through that premonition, knowing there's a problem, or the madness that we went through, or that real challenging time about the team growing, the collaboration problems, and throwing in COVID as well. Arguing, as I said, that's an interesting one. Kind of going down, defining some of those standards like our business capability model, even defining things as to what is an application. I remember endless kind of discussions around that. Once again, the licensing metric of LeanIX, which was very useful for us because it's not a seat-based license, was also a challenge because it's an application-based license. So once again, kind of arguing about what is a standard, what is an application out of that. And so we landed on a pretty good standard that worked for us. That means we could go forward. The consolidation phase, as I said, that really like spreadsheet assassination phase, getting rid of every register, every list, every independently managed artifact, and then can push them all into the central repository. Getting that momentum step, so finding your champions, training your team, making it easy for people to use, not restricting it. Of course, making sure you review the data and things like that, but really kind of making it as frictionless as possible, so people can just start using it. And then that kind of led into the proliferation stage, and then finally onto kind of prophecy, where we're now using it to judge things for investment, for strategy, and for other things like compliance, being able to fill those reports. So I'll briefly kind of talk about the ecosystem. So these are kind of the current integrations we have. So LeanIX being the primary one. We also use Atlas, and we have used Atlas for a long time as well, being able to kind of show that real kind of landscape view of all the applications that we have and the different domains that it maps to. Most recently is our Apptio and Cloudability connectivity. So Cloudability and Apptio we've been using for a while. So Cloudability does our Microsoft Azure spend, that feeds into Apptio with our SAP financial spend, and we've tied that into LeanIX, and we do the bi-directional sync in there now. So we can see all our applications from LeanIX and Apptio, and we now see our 12-month trailing TCO, total cost of ownership, back in LeanIX. We have some other systems that we do effectively like a manual integration at the moment, but will get more sophisticated over time. We use Castellan for our business continuity or a business impact assessment planning. That is kind of always going to be a separate system because it needs to be completely separate in case we do have a network outage. It's a contingency planning tool, so we don't want to link it into everything and have it taken down with everything else if it does go that way. Signavio we do use. We've got applications loaded in Signavio. Eventually, once we get more sophisticated, we'll look at doing it the other way as well. Our future plans are around ServiceNow. Pardon me. As I've said, ServiceNow it's still a challenge. It's getting better. We're using a lot of the automated tools, but we would really love to get that link from LeanIX to ServiceNow in. And the last one is Calibra for our kind of data lineage. So excellent. Thank you. Oh, I guess the final slide is just a snapshot of our environment. So we do track over 626 applications. We have about 5,000 interfaces. We do have a custom fact sheet in there as well, which we use for our quality engineering processes. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you've got any other kind of questions about it.
Thanks, Daniel. That's awesome, and I love spreadsheet assassination. It never gets old. So many organisations are challenged that they struggle with disparate data sources across the organisation. And moving into sort of the conversation around sort of the ecosystem where you're sort of landing now seems to be the focus of you having gone through those 7 steps. What was the situation? I understood that there was a significant set of spreadsheets around the finance side of things as well. Do you have insights to share there?
Yeah, so our Apptio journey has also been quite interesting. The challenge for us is really about understanding our total cost of ownership. So really being able to break that down. And I think of when we talk about tech business management, we talk about granularity. So kind of how do you get from that kind of bolder size understanding of the problem down to that more fine grain understanding? And while we have really detailed like spend analysis through cloudability, it was really hard attaching that to an application to see what our total cost of ownership was. And while we had fine detail in cloudability, our SAP was effectively at cost center. So I could see that the kind of the store team or the store customer platform, I could see their kind of costs coming in, or sorry, IT finance could see their costs coming in. But that was a mountain size challenge, and we needed to kind of drill that further down into like what does it actually cost to run an application.
Yeah, and with that sort of insight into running those applications and having an IT spend, I suspect the size of Coles, which would be no doubt significant. The benefits there are obviously quite significant as well. But who are the main stakeholders that were sort of interested in that understanding of the TCO? Was it wide across the organisation?
Yeah. So obviously our CFO was very, very keen on understanding our total cost of ownership. I guess one of the challenges that probably most people experience is why is tech so expensive? And also why is it so slow? But why is it so expensive? So what are we doing? And that was actually really challenging for us to answer. Like we know what we do. We have a lot of people that do stuff, but when it comes down to how much does a particular service cost, or if I'm receiving stuff at a warehouse, what does that service cost, and what applications are tied into that, and what teams and what contracts and what infrastructure is all tied to that. And that was something that we actually really just couldn't answer. We had ways of kind of grouping it up once again to that. If I think about mountain size granularity down to kind of like a hill or multiple hills, but that wasn't great. We could kind of say roughly we think this is that much, because we'd look at the contracts, but we didn't have people tied to that or support tied to that or as part of a shared platform. So we couldn't fractionalize that out. So it was I guess a challenge from the business as to why do things cost what they are. So that really drove the process, and that forced us to get a lot more granular, not only understanding our systems, but also really using that information we already have in LeanIX to feed into Apptio to then actually say, okay, we have a support team, and this support team supports these applications. So let's actually allocate those people to a BAU support of an application. So now we actually have, okay, a team of 10 supports 5 applications. So now we can actually say, roughly, at least for our as much as it takes for our like human capital, this is how much it costs for that. And then when we got a bit smarter on how we loaded in our contracts, then we could actually fractionalize out our contracts. So if you think about things like Oracle databases, and as I said, the information from Cloudability from Azure, and our other kind of support licenses through maybe Accenture or IBM, then we could actually kind of allocate them once again to a cost tower and break it down. So now we're getting to like from like a hill to like a kind of a large boulder size. So now we can actually really say, okay, this one application, it has a shared database platform, it has some components in the cloud, it has a support team. Now we can actually see what it costs roughly to actually support that application. We're still working through some of these challenges, but the request really came from, I guess, from the CFO and also our CTO, John, to say, like, how do we actually understand this? So how do we get more granular? Because we need to be able to say to the business, okay, if you want something to be cheaper, well, this is what we're turning off. If you have multiple things doing one capability, then you choose one that you turn off, and this is actually how much you could possibly save if we decommission that. So that's the kind of the key driver that we got that we are getting down towards.
So it sounds like it's changed that conversation significantly from here's a server that's running, is costing X amount, and not having a context for it, but that connection with the enterprise architecture. And it's your earlier point around democratization of enterprise architecture. So you're getting some defensible information around what the enterprise is doing, and then connecting that back to, and almost a chargeback, showback type model, I suppose, from the Apptio side, but having those costs aggregated in a way that you can actually delineate that. Who was actually driving the sort of the investment in connecting those two data sources, LeanIX and Apptio?
Yeah, so I guess if the population, or at least the verification of the data on the LeanIX side, that's been through my enterprise architect. So every application has an accountable EA. So we created a role for that to make sure that the EA looks through the data in there and effectively is the approver of that fact sheet. So we know that it's good. From the other side, from the Apptio side, we have IT finance team who is looking at that kind of cost modeling. We did have some specialists in to help us kind of structure our cost towers, our IT cost towers in there, and then it was. I guess the integration was done or internally, because as I said, we do have a team that can work on it, and I'm lucky to have that. So we did, we kind of looked at the scope of what we wanted to do from the LeanIX side, the scope of what we wanted to do on the Apptio side. Obviously, they work really well together, and then we were able to kind of like feed that data across, bi-directionally to to get those results, to show that the total cost of ownership, which for us has been an amazing achievement to be able to kind of get to that point.
That's brilliant. And to clear for the audience, I believe you're using both the Apptio One product as well as the Cloudability product in there. So you're connecting the whole TBM stack on the Apptio One as well as the SaaS sort of the costings through Cloudability, and it aggregates together to give you that clear picture. How wide is the access available from the Apptio perspective? Who outside of sort of the democratized EA capability, which I understand sort of architecture for the enterprise as opposed to a squirreled away enterprise architecture view. But how wide is the Apptio or the IT finance views?
Yeah, so the Apptio view is like I have a view of my own cost center. All the heads of across Coles have a view of their cost centers, and sometimes even, for example, delivery teams or support teams under that will have even a sub view of their head of view as well. So especially if you've got some of the bigger support areas, they will have lots of teams that do different supports of different types of applications. So they'll have a cost breakdown of their area, which will roll up to the head of view, which will then roll up to the GM view, and eventually up to kind of the that C-level view as well. So it is widely used. I go through a regular process once a month at minimum of looking through my own cost center and my own projections to see how much are things going to cost. Admittedly, I only have. In my cost center, I only have LeanIX and Apptio, so I pretty much know that's standard and it's not going to change dramatically. But for some of the other areas, especially with lots of cloud components and a lot of size or dynamically sized workloads in Azure, you can see obviously the costs go up and down over the different periods.
And is there any sense for the broader organisation then around sort of cost savings that may have been attributed to this greater visibility as well?
Yes, I suppose it's hard to directly attribute a cost saving from this, but at least it allows us to look at those applications and really make that call on whether we should or whether we should strive to go for a decommission, because we know now that, okay, if we go for a decommission of this particular thing, because we've got a duplicate capability or we have a better option or a better solution now we know that we should be able to save this much. And I know everyone's kind of going into maybe more like tough financial times, so really being able to show once again that, okay, we should actually target a decommission because it will save this, so that money can then be reinvested in something else more interesting, as opposed to just hanging on to that one system because it might be hard to decommission, or a couple of people might want it, but really focusing on the benefit of reducing total cost of ownership.
Becomes a more quantified sort of data-driven sort of decision-making process then as well. This many users, this business capability, this cost that was much harder prior to having Apptio, when it would just be, okay, we think that, okay, if it runs on a VM cluster, we're using 3 VMs, we just kind of guess what it would be. It's now a lot more granular around that. Yeah, no, thanks for that. And the last question from me, and then I'm going to switch over to the Q&A element there. But I was really wondering whether you've actually presented this information up to the execs. So there's people with access directly to it. The heads of have got access to Apptio directly. Is it also used for sort of executive reporting?
It's definitely used by the GMs. It would be the roll-up view would be used by our CTO John, so he would be looking at that. It would definitely be used by IT finance to paint the picture to the exec level about what components, those kind of, once again, those IT cost towers, what that roll-up view about what each part costs. So whether we're talking about like corporate systems or our fintech area or our supply chain area. So those rolled up views would be definitely pulled out of Apptio to show at a level. I wouldn't suggest that the C level might necessarily be diving into it, but at least they'd be looking at reports directly pulled out of it.
Pulled out of it, yeah, perfect, perfect. I'm going to change it up into the Q&A part of the discussion. So I'm going to go through some that have come in. So was it easy was it easy to ask them not to use existing spreadsheets anymore? What was sort of the pushback from that? Surely each Excel is special.
Well, it was challenging. Some people love their spreadsheets, and I guess this period, I guess, of that consolidation, it wasn't a week or a month. That was more like a year. So that was kind of going through after the RFP and after we did the initial data load. It was kind of telling people that, hey, we've got this system now. You don't have to keep it in a spreadsheet. So like I'd try and wrestle it away from them and just say, look, I'll load it in, or I'll get one of my team or one of our grads to load it in, and then it's there, and then you can look at it and it's live. So please stop using your spreadsheet. I'm going to delete it from everywhere that you can, and just look at this. And I'll give you a special report if you need to. If you don't like any of the default ones, I'll give you a report that then shows your data in kind of the way that you wanted to see it. And once people started seeing that at least the data was fresh and relevant and updated, then they'd actually kind of give up their their SharePoint or their Confluence page or their Excel. So the approach seemed to be very supportive and nurturing rather than assertive and thou shalt not. It's come over here, and we've got you covered. So we wanted to be friendly, and we wanted to make it work for as many people as we could. That's fantastic. Question from Angus is, how many level 1 business capabilities does Coles have? Oh, I'm sure I know one of my IBLs is probably on the call. They should be able to tell me. I could go into the system and have a quick look, but I think we've got... Actually, I think Colin from Virgin has answered on your behalf. It's you've got 800 or so. Oh, no, that's applications, I think. But, so 600 applications. I know we've got 800 business capabilities. We mapped it. I think there's, I think there's about 30 or so level 1s, and it goes obviously kind of like down further up from there. That's a good manageable amount. So it gives you good sort of segmentation. Yeah. And for us, I guess that covers everything from manufacturing, because we make, things like wine and that the people might not even know. So we make a lot of things. We, buy, plan, make, move, and then sell. So there's a lot of capabilities that we cover across there. And Colin from Virgin says that he's looking at Socky now. So that's obviously hitting their industry at this minute. So is all this type of data visible to everyone in LeanIX? Is that the way you guys have implemented it? Yeah. We don't hide anything. We lock down some fields so people can't edit it. That's been quite important. So obviously, if you're driving reporting or like Essential 8 level 1 compliance off of something, we don't want people to just be able to change it willy-nilly. So we did create a custom role in there, which is effectively like an audit role, to make sure people don't change it, but it's visible to everyone. So everything is accessible and visible. So we try not to hide anything. We want everyone to have all the information that they need to make a decision. Brilliant. And Spiro asks, how long did it take you to realize any value from LeanIX? I would say probably after the initial data load, some of the value was almost immediately realized, because at that time we were getting a lot of board requests. So we had a relatively new board. We were also looking at effectively John Cox being our new CTO. So we had a lot of new obligations to meet, and I kind of clocked it in. It would take us anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to just collate all these spreadsheets, call around all the teams, especially once again, it was in remote working, the start of that. So it was very difficult back then. It would take 4 to 6 weeks to be able to collate this, finally get a new spreadsheet out and be able to kind of produce it and, tidy it up and normalize it and then send it on. And then I said kind of immediately that data was, it was like stagnant after that. So being able to kind of facilitate things like that. I remember one of the first times I actually pulled a report directly out, and it took kind of 5 minutes. It was just so refreshing. And then, the request was, oh, can you add this field? I'm like, oh yeah, I just, add another column, and then the data that was there. I guess it was pretty immediate. Once we had that kind of critical mass in there of, after we'd used the Kapish kind of kickstart program to kind of get all the stuff in there. Once we had that kind of critical mass initially, it was it was pretty quick that we actually be able to realize our benefits out of it.
So if I remember correctly, so our jump start was sort of around that 4 to 6 weeks, and so you're seeing value shortly after that. So probably within the first 2 months of implementation.
Yeah.
And obviously you're still increasing those benefits over the 3 or 4 years that you've been on the journey, but continue to uplift. Angus asks, where would you start if an organisation had no EA capability? We see a bit of this actually, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
No EA capability. Well, that's a bit of a question about like how do you build an EA practice, but
and you started with a very small practice, I suppose, when before the madness started.
Yeah, it was, and we did grow significantly. I guess, that's a bit a bit of an issue one, but I guess everyone, like we found value in other teams using it. It wasn't just enterprise architects using it. So it was development teams and cloud teams, and especially like our API teams. They found it really useful, and we have actually some automations in there, so they can actually add all their integrations in once they commit through the CI/CD pipeline. So some other teams found value out of it. It doesn't have to be an EA team, but I guess one of the really big values that we did find was creating that really common vernacular, so the business capability model that actually helped us to talk to the rest of technology and other areas of the business to kind of establish like a common way to describe your entire organization. That was really important at the start, because then we could actually start placing applications and see where they fit in and what capabilities they support. And then that enabled more discussion with the business and other teams that aren't so necessarily like tech savvy or tech focused.
Yeah, and I think one of the things many of our customers talk about is not necessarily having a core EA team, but actually having enterprise architecture sort of smeared through the organisation, being able to have that. That's where I think LeanIX and the democratization approach sort of helps, depending on the scale of the organisation, whether you have a dedicated capability or whether it's actually a distributed capability.
Yeah.
And I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to have to ask just one more question, I think, which is from Ian, and he's curious as to what reports and diagrams you guys are using. I find the most useful. There's lots of options in there. Yeah. So, what's the ones you love the most?
There are a lot. I guess one of my favorite ones is kind of the time assessment model. So the kind of Gartner time rating: tolerate, invest, migrate, eliminate. So time assessment by capability. That's really great to be able to see what capabilities have the kind of oldest end of life out of support applications. And another one I use is kind of our SOCI report. It was pretty easy to kind of pull that together. So we see our SOCI applications all in one view. And the other one I really like as well is the application by IT component. So we can see all of our IT components against all our applications, where our phase in, our phase out, our end of life decommission is. So yeah, that's my other favorite one.
That's fantastic. We are on time. I want to hand over to Rachel to wrap us up. But I want to personally thank you, Daniel, for sharing your experiences. And it's a really good cohort we've got on the call today. So I want to thank you for sharing, and thank Ed as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I hope you all enjoyed hearing from Dan at Coles. And I think it's pretty obvious about the significant value that Coles are achieving through aligning their business, IT and finances, and integrating between LeanIX and Apptio. So look, if you're part of an argument of architects and you're interested to know a little bit more about how we can help you on that journey, please feel free to reach out. Craig, if you can just go to the last slide there is some contact details there. There's a QR code where you can scan to book an appointment or just a chat with us, or otherwise please reach out to Jack on the phone number here, and he'll be able to tee up some time to speak with one of the account executives, and we'd really love to have the opportunity to chat with you a little bit more about it. So thanks again to Dan from Coles for his really insightful presentation, and to Ed Chung from Apptio for sharing the Apptio tool with us. Really appreciate you joining us today, guys. And we will share this recording with everybody as soon as we've got it ready to go. So hope we have the opportunity to chat again. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.